ago, the pastor of a men's retreat encouraged us to kneel in prayer to practice humility before God. The posture was new to me, but I knelt beside other men to bow before the Lord. I was so moved by that experience that I adopted a daily pattern of kneeling in prayer to show more reverence to God. Now in my 70s and with arthritic knee pain, I can no longer kneel much, but I can still come before the Lord in humility because God sees me beyond my physical posture to my heart. So whether I sit, stand, or kneel, I can focus my worshiping the heart on God. God desires humility from all of us, but humility doesn't always come naturally. Sometimes it's difficult to admit we're wrong and ask for forgiveness, to serve others by doing menial tasks, or refrain from boasting about accomplishments. But Jesus is our ultimate example of humility. He became a man, served others, and was obedient to death on a cross. So when we look to Jesus and ask God for help, we can grow in humility. Let us pray. Dear Jesus, following your example, we ask that you help us bow before God and worship in true humility. Amen. Sissy, come up and do your wonderful thing. George, good to see you.
We are still seeking justice this whole quarter, and today the topic is giving justly. Now, we've already defined justice as do what's right in the right place at the right time. There's no set, everything has to be done the same way all the time, but doing right at the time the best you can is justice. Okay, so we are, when it says giving justly, we are called on to think about what it is we are called on to give. What is justice? What is rightly ours to give? This is from Corinthians, and I'll just say a word or two about Corinthians. It was the letters, there are two of them that were written by Paul, and they are very fine letters about how to behave and how to act as Christians, because Corinth was it was kind of like the worst place in the world. It was New Orleans at Mardi Gras. It was, it was something where everybody was misbehaving and doing their own thing, and the Corinthian church had its problems about, they would gather together to have dinner, and everybody who brought the good stuff would sit together and they wouldn't share it with anybody else. And, but that was just one way of being selfish. They also didn't behave themselves in their daily walk. And Paul is very harsh with the Corinthian church in both letters. He writes them once and he tells them exactly what they're supposed to do, and then he has to say, it didn't take the first time, I have to write another one and I'll be more forceful in this one. And so the Corinthians does give us a stern discipline in our lives. If we read Corinthians, we will find out what is justice, how is it described, and how we might make application in our own behavior. And of course today the topic is giving. Now Paul was making circuits all around the Mideastern world. He had a collection plate. Everywhere he went, he took his collection plate, and he was collecting money. So that's not new in the church when people start around asking for money. They've been doing it since the very beginning. But what he was doing it for was that the Jerusalem church was starving. There was a famine in that part of the country, and food was very scarce, and people were really literally starving to death. And so he was collecting for not just so they could build a bigger church, or not so they could have, you know, a very fine altar cloth or anything else. He was trying to actually provide the necessities of life for the members of that church. And the church is it's supposed to be a fellowship that takes care of each other. And, you know, that's the first thing that we are called on to do, is to take care of each other, take care of our, and then we are supposed to take care of those around us, those that we see and need. So the church takes care of its own within the walls, and then it reaches out beyond, and it takes care of people around it that they see and need. So that's what Paul's collection plate was about. And he wanted to make sure that the Corinthian church got the message about their obligation to give. The scripture is from 2 Corinthians. It is also from the 32nd Psalm, I think. No, excuse me, it's from Proverbs. I'm going to read the scripture that we have in your lesson book. Since you excel in everything, this is to the Corinthian church, you excel in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in the love we have kindled in you. Also, see to it that you excel in the grace of giving. I'm not commanding you, but I want to test the sincerity of your love by comparing it with the earnestness of others. For you know that the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, and through his poverty you might become rich. And here is my judgment about what is best for you in this matter. Last year, you were the first not only to give, but also to have the desire to do so. Now finish the work that you so eagerly, that you may be matched by your completion of it, according to your means. For if the willingness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what one has, not according to what one does not have. Our desire is not that others might be relieved while you are hard pressed, but that there might be some equality. At the present time, your plenty will supply what they need, so that in turn, their plenty might supply what you need. This goal is equality, as it is written. The one who gathered much never had too much, and the one who gathered little did not have too little. I started thinking about all the ways that we have to consider giving. And I read, I think this may be in the student book. The student book lesson was excellent this week. So, and it had a good story in it. Tell the story first, and then make the point. The story was that the author of this book and his wife were going shopping for Easter presents, so to do Easter for their children. And they went to a candy store, and the little boy, who was only 7, 8 years old, was walking around the store, and he saw a box of candy, and they bought him a little box of candy. He was looking for Easter, but they just had a little box that has 2 or 3 pieces of chocolate, and since they were in the candy store, they gave him that, kind of as a tithe over until the Easter Bunny could come bring him something better. So he was very proud of that little box of chocolates. It was all his, given to him by his parents. So they got in the car and started down the road, and the mother turned around and said, how is the candy? And he said, oh, it's delicious. And she said, would you give me a piece? And he looked at her and he thought, what do you want with my candy? This is my candy. And the father said, well, I would like a piece of candy too. And he said, his back went up and he decided he didn't want to share. And the reason was they had all the money in the world. They could go buy anything they wanted to do. Why would they want to take his candy? And he never stopped to think of where the candy came from. That was theirs to begin with. They gave it all to him. All they asked for was a little back. And of course, the story is set up here to illustrate that everything we have is a gift of God. Just everything you have. No matter what you do, how much you earn, what you own, the grace of God has made it possible for you to have what you have. So everything you have is a gift. And God does call on us to share what we have with others who have less, to share what we have and make, some equality, some justice, because you have too little, because somebody else has too little, and you can supply their needs. So that is a major portion of the church. And it is called, in this lesson book, the third rail. I didn't get it. I was reading it and it said, giving is the third rail of the church. And so I had to think about that a while. I read the book, went back to it, read it again, and I thought, what is the first rail? And I started thinking, well, the first rail must be faith, and the second rail must be hope, and the third rail is love, and that's giving. And that didn't really match up a little bit. And then I remembered that what vows I took and you took when we became members of the United Methodist Church. We promised, we vowed to support this congregation by, first rail, our prayers. Second, our presence. Third, our gifts. Fourth, our witness. Service and prayers, presence, gift, services, and witness. There are 5 rails in our devotion. Witness was just added several years ago to that set of things we promised to do. But the third rail is giving. Before it's right in the middle. It's right there. And I asked Dick, who's from a railroad family, what does the third rail mean in the railroad business? And he said, oh, that's his mother worked for Coastline for all of her adult life, I think, starting at like 17 and worked until she was 80. But the third rail, he said, meant that is the one that is electrically charged. That's the one that powers the train to move. Without that third rail, it has the charge in it that makes it sparks and makes it start going. And once the momentum builds up, it keeps on, it keeps on going. But that third rail is not only all the energy that runs the whole train, it's also a dangerous one if you have to, you don't step on it. When you're in the rail yard, you don't step on that third rail because the charge would electrocute you. So you beware of it, you know it's there, and you know its purpose, and you respect that third rail. So we are talking about the third rail today, and the topic is giving. And Paul is telling them that they have enough to share with other people, and that he is making a requirement on them to share that, which has been the duty of the church for a long time. See if I have another point to make there. No, that is kind of what he's saying. Now, I think it is our obligations to examine. Oh, we're not really good at giving anymore. Do you know this? That what is the biblical measurement for giving?
Tithe.
Tithe. A tithe. A tithe is 10%, okay? That is, if you have 10 pieces of candy, you would give one of them. If you have $10, you'd give one of them, okay? The United Methodist Church is not very good at that. Our giving is on the church wide is less than 7%. So it's close, but it's not, doesn't make the mark. It is not as much as it was during the Great Depression. When people had very little money, they gave more percentage-wise to the church than they do in times of prosperity. And I thought that was kind of an interesting situation. They gave out of their need, more than they gave out of their abundance. And it is, I think if we kind of translate that into a spiritual realm, I think that we can see our spiritual needs are great enough so that we can give out of our need. Paul says he doesn't want us to deprive ourselves of food and clothes and, a way to make a living. He wants you to give what you can give or what you can share. If you've got a box and it's got 5 pieces in it, you don't need all 5 pieces. You can give, a piece of that away without begrudging it. And so he's encouraging them in a lot of ways that giving is the third rail of the church. And when the church fails to be moving and fails to be picking up steam, fails to be generating energy, is something to do with the giving of who is there. And I hadn't stopped to think about that so much, but it is that third rail is the energy. And I know in some situations, people give more than they owe. The author of this says he went to qualify to buy a house, and they talked to him about the house and everything, and they said that he was qualified to buy a house that cost $150,000, and he was making about $30,000 a year. And he got home and said, boy, I could buy this house for $130,000, and the payments were far more than he could really afford. And he sat down and said, I cannot possibly afford to buy that house. But somebody was willing to, sink him, put him in the hole, because it would have taken really far more of his income than he could afford to give. That's not what Paul's letter is calling on us, not to, I think maybe it's saying something about don't get yourself in debt. You don't have to be in debt to own things. You really ought to be able to support your needs and work as support yourself. But no matter how little you have, there's a place for giving some of it to someone who has less. And he says if you gather much, you never have too much, but if you give away much, you never have too little. And the Proverbs kind of supplement this idea that says when you give a lot, you receive more. I think this is in Proverbs. This is Proverbs 3, and I'm going to read a few of these verses. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of your crops. When your barns will be full to overflowing, then your barns will be full to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. Do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, as fathers discipline a son he delights in. This passage goes on, give of the first fruits. Now, the first fruits are a biblical metaphor for something greater to follow. When Jesus rose from the grave, Paul declared, "Now is Christ risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that slept." Okay, he was the first fruits, the first to spring up from the ground, and the promise was that the first fruits would bring in a vast harvest so that we too could believe in the promise of resurrection and eternal life. So first fruits promise something that is greater to come in the future. And the writer of Proverbs, which is probably Solomon, says, if you give the first fruits of your labors to the Lord, the first fruits of your wealth to the Lord, then your barns will be full to overflowing. You can expect a greater reward, a greater return. You can probably think of a lot of situations where you have maybe made a sacrifice, maybe begrudgingly, but it turned out to be a joy. You've given something, and a lot of times it's not, dollars and cents. Sometimes if someone is in need and you give them some time, you give them some caring, you give them your friendship, that is a wealth that you have. That everything, I said, every gift you've got was given to you. Like that little boy's father and mother gave him the chocolate. Don't begrudge giving away something that was given to you, and use it as, and of course Proverbs goes on to say, if you, I'll read you a little bit of this too, because it says, if you actually abide by the words, if you give, if you use the gifts that God has given you, you will be greatly rewarded. Consider the value of wisdom. Blessed is the man who finds wisdom and the one who gains understanding, for wisdom is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. Wisdom is more precious than rubies. Nothing you can desire can compare with it. Long life is in her right hand, and in her left are riches and honors. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who embrace her, and those who lay hold of her will be blessed. He's saying the wisdom of the concept. What if you give of your wealth to the Lord? That is wisdom. Give it, and give it in joy and in good cheer, and you will be so blessed with all the riches that are returned to you. By wisdom the Lord laid the earth's foundations. By understanding he set the heavens in place. By his knowledge were the deeps divided, and the cloud let drop their dew. Do not withhold good things when it is in your power to give them. Do not say to your neighbor, come back later, I'll give you something tomorrow, when you have the withal to do it today. This is pretty good proverbial wisdom there. And our giving justly is saying, okay, that is giving what is right for you. And Paul says, don't ever deprive yourself of, although a lot of times when you do deprive yourself of something, it's not necessary to your life, but you deprive yourself of something to give to someone else. It does return more to you than you've given away. And I know that I felt very uplifted about reading all this about giving. When did you start thinking about supporting the church with your prayers, your presence, your gifts, and your services, and your witness. I don't know, I guess probably I thought about that. When did I start this process? And who taught me to do it? And it was probably when I was in elementary school and going to Sunday school, and my parents would give me a couple of nickels. That was...
They don't do it anymore.
They don't do it anymore. They, be sure that that was a gift to me. It was in my hands, and I could put it in the pocket, but they knew they gave it to me to give to the Sunday school collection and the church collection. And it was kind of fun to have that plate passed and have something to put in it. Got a little rush out of that. And although I used to say, okay, I make a pledge to the church, and I pledge to give a certain amount, and probably will do more than that, but I pledge to do it, and I'll write a check all at one time. And that would be, and I quit doing that a long time ago, because I got in, remembered those days of putting the nickels in, the collection at Sunday school, and I want to put my offering in the collection plate when it is passed by on Sunday morning. And I don't know if that's just because I think that it is it's my way of, it's a worship. It's a, I am returning something that was given to me. I had nothing, every gift I have, every good thing I have is a gift of God. And so when that plate passes by, I want to put something in, and I want to do it in the setting of worship and say, please accept this humble gift. And it's just a joy to give. And so it kind of puzzles me why so many people get distressed when the minister has to stand up and say, we haven't made our budget. We haven't gotten enough, either we haven't gotten enough pledges or people have not paid enough pledges, and we're asking everybody to dig a little deeper and help meet the expenses. And on the way out, people says all they ever talk about is money. And that isn't true. It's not all they ever talk about, but it is, next to prayers and presents, your gifts are the third rail, and that's what runs the organization. That's where the power and the energy comes from. And should be no resentment, because you have so many graces and so many gifts, and all that God is asking for is a piece of it. Piece of it. Even though He owns the box. He gave you the box. He's asking for a piece back. And I appreciated and enjoyed all the reading that went along with this lesson. Have any comments?
Thank you so much, Sissy. It's always great to have your great lesson. And it does prove that everything we have is not ours. It's what the Lord has given us. The privilege where we have been born, the privilege of what we've accomplished in our life. That's wonderful. Today, in the Family Life Center, they're having a fair for those things that we do in the church, like bereavement. If you want to participate in a Bible study, we have great Bible studies going at different times. So go downstairs before you go to church and look at what we have there. I think you'll find something that will give you pleasure. I know Patty and I and the Donovans have attended Bible study, I guess, for 15 or 20 years, and have enjoyed every moment of it and made great friends, like most of our friends I see here in our class. Are there any announcements or concerns of the class?
Well, I will say
Yes.
I spoke with Suzanne because she hadn't been here a couple weeks, and I'm worried about her, but she's fine. She's been having grandsons and their friends for slumber parties before school starts, one at a time, so.
Who were you talking to?
Suzanne.
Oh,
Because she
okay.
hadn't been here in a
Yeah,
couple of weeks,
yeah.
I thought, well, I'll call and see how she is. And she said, oh, I'm fine, I just had the boys over and we've had slumber parties with their friends, and then the next weekend she had the other one and had slumber. So she's good and,
She goes back to Moffett in October.
right. But when she wasn't here for a couple of weeks, I don't know.
I thought so too, but her
And-
hip is good.
Yes.
Yeah. And you and Patty visited
We
Sarah.
went to see Sarah, and
She's
she
doing
seemed to be
good.
doing all right. I think she's, Mrs. K.O., because he was with her for about a month out there, but
Have you gone to
did
see
you go
Libby?
to? No, and is Libby, somebody called me, Ann Davis called me, is she home, or is she living with Barbara, or where is Libby?
I
She's
I
living.
don't
With
know.
Barbara. With Barbara? Okay, well, then I
I'll
need-
I'll
because
find
Ann
out
wanted
from
an
Barbara,
address,
because
so-
I went by and there was nobody came to the door, and I thought, well, I didn't call, and I need to call her,
I
and I
need
wondered.
Barbara's address, because Ann Davis wants to send her a card from the circles, and I didn't know, I just thought it was where she always was, so I didn't realize she was with Barbara. She did not sound like herself, I called her to let her know about Mary Lou.
Yeah.
She didn't sound the
That's
same.
why I thought maybe you had gotten in touch with her.
Not since then.
Well, let's find out where she is so we can celebrate her birthday.
Yeah, somehow.
Patrick, how's Janice?
Well, she making some improvement,
Very good.
Good.
and she decided to take a break today.
Good.
Can we do anything for her? Do we?
Prayers.
Prayer.
Prayers.
We are doing that.
And for you?
Prayer for me.
If that's it, but our director of humor, our sainted one, come up and give us our humor for the day.
Who was that?
That's you, brother. Stand and deliver.
We were getting.
I don't even get paid for this. I said, I don't even get paid for this.
You don't?
God will reward you.
No, no.
Yeah, don't touch it.
Don't touch it.
Can't touch it, I can't read the paper. We're in real world. That's all I can say. A foursome consisting of three young guys and an old man were getting ready to putt on the green. The devil decided he wanted to get in to some mischief, so he appeared suddenly on the green, halfway between the players and the flagstick. The three younger guys screamed in a panic and they ran off. The old man stayed over his putt, lining it up. The devil was confused as the old man's courage. "Don't you know who I am?" said the devil. "Sure do," said the old man. "Aren't you afraid?" "No." "Why not?" asked the devil, still confused. "Because I've been married to your sister for over 15 years.
We'll all stand and you can sit, Jim. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. Amen.